And we are a go.
Yeah, we're live. Welcome to the show, everyone. Tonight we're talking with Evan McMullin. Evan is challenging Mike Lee in the U.S. Senate, and he's going to come on and kind of give a stump speech and kind of tell all of us, what he's running for, what he's hoping to achieve, if there's any changes he wants to enact. So, Evan, go ahead and tell us about yourself. Tell us where you come from, and tell us about your run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to the conversation. I'm running for U.S. Senate in this cycle. Mike Lee is up for re-election, and I'm challenging him for his seat. He is somebody who has served in that seat for about 12 years now. That's 2 terms, of course, in the Senate. And I think it's time for a change. And the reason for that is that I'm concerned that our country is abandoning the values that make it strong. You know, I believe that a major source of our strength as a country is our values, the same values that were enshrined in our founding documents, especially the Declaration of Independence, where our founders said that we were all created free, that we were naturally free, something that I believe is a basic truth about human nature, that our minds are created free, we are inherently naturally free, and also that we're created equal, that we have equal value and that we're equal under the law. And so I believe that those 2 values are the key to our national strength. They've been the key to our successes in the past as a country, and I believe they're the key to our future. They certainly mean that government must be accountable to us, right? Because if government is not accountable to the people, then that means that we are no longer actually free, and we certainly are not equal, because some have power and others do not. And so that's what I'm trying to preserve, our commitment to our values and a government that's accountable to us, and therefore a country in which we can all pursue happiness. I think that is the deepest human cause, the most profound human cause, is the pursuit of happiness. Now, of course, we're all different, and we're all, as I said, I believe we're inherently free. And that means that we need to have, our government needs to respect our freedom to pursue happiness in the way that makes the most sense for us. And so that's why I'm running. I think our politics are broken now. They're broken because we're so divided. Our extremes, I feel, are pulling us apart and making it impossible for us to find find solutions to the major challenges that we're facing, whether it's inflation or the high cost of healthcare, or air quality is a problem we have out here. We're in a historic drought. We've got all kinds of national security challenges. And we just fail to overcome them nowadays because we can't find common ground to do it. And I think that's because I fear we're abandoning our values. I think that when we are committed to our founding values, we can find common ground on many things and move forward. Not on all things, there'll still be differences, but we can find common ground and move forward. And that's the kind of leadership, that's, I think, the special sauce, the secret sauce of Utah, is that our politics often are those kinds of politics where we hold the principle, but we still find common ground to solve problems. And that's the kind of leadership that I think we've got to send to Washington. I think we're at a time in our country now where, we seem to be coming apart, honestly. More and more people are thinking about, are imagining that, we could have some, broad internal conflict in the United States, or that states would withdraw from the union, these kinds of things, which I still think are unlikely. But recent polls show that more and more people think that it could happen, which is, I think, an awful commentary. And so we've got to find a new way forward. I think the country needs Utah's leadership. And that's why I'm running, because I know we have a better way of doing things here. We call it the Utah way. And I want to take that to Washington.
So what, dialing in on specifics, what measures would you take to try to cause some unity?
Yeah. Well, the first and foremost is I want to be an advocate for our values. I just talked about what those are. It seems like today in our politics, people don't want to talk about values because it seems Pollyannish or naive. But I think it's naive to think that our country is going to thrive or even survive if we're not committed to our values. And so I want to be an advocate for those values. But look, there are a handful of challenges that I really want the country to overcome. One of them is the cost of healthcare. I don't know how it is for either of you or for your listeners. I know, for most of us, we pay thousands of dollars a month for healthcare, even if we're healthy. And it takes thousands of dollars every year families are spending before their insurance kicks in. And it's a serious burden. So, and in Washington, what do they talk about? They talk about how to subsidize these high costs of healthcare, but they're not willing to take on the special interests that cause these high costs of healthcare. So that's what I want to do on healthcare. I want to find ways to lower the underlying costs that we end up bearing, our families end up bearing, and it's just too much. It's usually thousands of dollars every month for the average family. So, we've got it. There are ways to do that. For example, the government, Congress wrote in a law that prevented the government from negotiating on prescription drugs, right? So the government buys all these prescription drugs for people receiving government help, Medicaid. But Congress has prohibited the government from negotiating using their market power to negotiate those prices down. So the fact that the government doesn't negotiate on those prices props up high prices, and we all have to pay those. And so Americans pay more for healthcare, by the way, than anyone else in the world. We pay more. And it's because, special interests have worked their way into the lawmaking process, and we, the people, have suffered. And so I want to make common sense changes like that. I'm not afraid to take on the special interests who have caused these inefficiencies in our healthcare system that are ending up costing us so much money. I'm not afraid to take them on. I also want to make sure that our air quality is better. Our kids' soccer games are getting canceled during the summer because of air quality. It's awful. We love to hike and spend time. We're mountain people. We love to spend time in the mountains. And we've got to find a way to prevent forest fire smoke from blowing in from California and from our own forest fires here, and other issues that are causing our air quality to be so bad. So what does that take? It takes better forest management. I think the government has done a terrible job managing our forests, managing managing our lands, and we've got to do a better job with that, and we've got to work together. I'll just say on that, part of the problem is that the East Coast has far more representatives in Congress than the West Coast.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it happen where the West Coast says, hey, we need this out here because we're suffering from some problem. And the East Coast, those representing the East Coast, of course, they don't care. It's not their problem. Well, and so we end up having problems like forest management, I think, spin out of control. And there are other things we need to do. Yeah.
Can I throw a little bit of pushback on all you said? I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah. Go ahead.
On the medical side, I'm scared of government getting involved because every time government sticks its finger in that soup, it gets more expensive and less valuable. Every time. Going back to Nixon when he did the what was it, HMOs all the way far. I mean, you can go back to FDR when he first started when that first started becoming part of our economy as far as the workforce system, was because FDR said, in his communist ideals, hey, I'm going to get in and control the economy bit by bit and make this Great Depression last 12 years, when honestly, I think it should have been solved in less than 2. And it wasn't all his fault because Hoover kicked off that design. But just recent memory, we all remember this, Obama stuck his finger in that soup, and our value of our health care and health insurance, both of them took a major hit. The doctors took a hit because they had to fill out more crappy paperwork. They had to retrain all of their personnel how to do that. During that retraining time, every office took a loss, every patient took a loss. And then after that, every insurance went up and every value of that went down. I mean, then the next thing, on the air quality from California.
Well, But before you do that,
Yeah.
let me just say that
Go on.
I think we agree. I mean, look, what you're describing is exactly the situation with our prescription drug prices, right? So the government comes in and it's, there are people who are really struggling and they get Medicaid because they're, they've suffered some big loss in their lives and they need help. And so they get Medicaid, and the government therefore is paying that for their drugs, but not using its market power to simply negotiate, right? We believe in competition.
Well, I've got a question for you on that.
Yeah.
What if we read 2 paragraphs down in the Constitution, or 10 paragraphs down, I apologize, and did the 10th Amendment and then let the states compete?
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that the state should play an active role and they should be free to compete. And they certainly should do that. I mean, I think anywhere where we can inject more competition into our prescription drug market and other elements of our healthcare system, we're going to end up with lower prices, better service, more transparency, and hopefully better health for Americans. But right now we've got a massive problem. I mean, I'm sure we agree, it sounds like we do, that competition is critical. I think competition is critical in politics. It's critical in business, of course. It's critical in just the realm of ideas, which is, and you're engaging in that here with your podcast, which is great. But, in healthcare, you've got regional hospital monopolies. You've got, there are laws that, for example, I don't know if everyone knows this, but, if a pharmaceutical company produces a drug, right, they invest, they produce a drug, they make a profit, that's all great. But what happens is that they can pay, once their patent has ended, over a certain period of time, they've made a bunch of money, their patent is over, then you have these other pharmaceutical companies that would go out and produce a generic drug for much cheaper. So people would have it then for much cheaper. But what pharmaceuticals can do now, the major big pharmaceutical companies, they can pay the generic producers not to produce that drug off patent. And that keeps that price artificially high. So that's an anti-competitive practice that they're doing that's hurting us. You've got senior citizens who are paying crazy rates for prescription drugs when people on the other side of the border in Canada or elsewhere, pay 20 cents on the dollar for it. So
I agree.
Let that continue. It's corruption.
What about this, Evan? I want to gauge how deep this could go. Should I be arrested for buying my prescription drugs in Mexico or Canada and coming across the border with them?
It doesn't seem, I don't think so. If you're going to buy prescription drugs, if you're going to travel to buy prescription drugs cheaper elsewhere, and there may be some situations where there's some dangerous substance or something that government's afraid that will come into the country and do harm to people. We certainly have, for example, with fentanyl, examples of that, where you've got harmful drugs that have been pushed on Americans, and now we have an opioid crisis. So there's reason to be careful about some of that. But I think Americans are increasingly traveling elsewhere to get quality but more affordable health care. Yeah,
and medical tourism is a big thing.
Medical tourism, that's the word for it. You're right. So it shouldn't be that way, though. This is America. We ought to be able to have quality health care for affordable price. Nobody's asking for a handout, or we don't need it to be free. But let's not have, our administrative costs in our healthcare system are 8%. Most industrialized nations have their administrative costs in healthcare are only 2%. So they're all,
and that goes with that Obamacare thing, or the Affordable Care Act. It upped the administrative costs overnight, and it shocked.
No doubt about the fact that we need to make a lot of changes, and we've got to make improvements. Look, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but my view is that we have some people talk about healthcare and insurance being a right. I don't go that far, because what if we were a country as poor as one of the poorest countries on earth. How would we do that? So I don't see it as the same as free speech, for example. But I do think we have a moral obligation in a country like ours to make sure that everybody has access to quality health care. Not free. I mean, you got to work for it, pay for it if you can. And, nobody's asking for a handout, but we can't have sort of, special interests protecting their own bottom lines at the gross expense of senior citizens, for example. We just can't have it. So let's find a way. I also think that if you've got pre-existing conditions, you shouldn't be prohibited from having health insurance, and hopefully we fix that. But there are some who want to roll that back. That's just not humane. We can't. That's not America. That's not the America I think we should be, at least. And so let's find a way. And I think there's a lot of common ground on this issue. It just takes people and politicians and leaders who are willing to stand up to special interests who have a lot of power.
Well, yeah, that's a big question. That's why I bring it back to the 10th Amendment. Instead of Medicaid and Medicare being federally issued, what if it was complete state issue? What if, we're supposed to be, the ultimate design is we're supposed to be a testing ground of ideas.
50 Petri dishes.
Yes. So that the states could try their own things and learn from each other. But right now we get, quite frankly, for the most, I would say, not the best meaning people in DC making decisions for all of us. And I'm not trying to disparage them, but let's just go off. Let's go off their record. They're not the best meaning people. They're not someone that you would trust to babysit your infant. And they're making decisions for us. And I want to talk about that fire coming from California. Again, those fires in California are a mismanagement of government. When California makes laws that you can't undercut deadfall or any of that and clear it out, they're making a tinderbox. And then California freaks out. Australia did the same thing. Australia spent a summer on fire because their government stepped in and said, we're not going to remove deadfall. Give it 4 years to dry out more. It burns hot and fast.
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, it's the federal government, it's state governments. I mean, it's just we've got to be better all around. I mean, it is awful. I mean, you guys look like you might enjoy, the outdoors like I do, and I'm making a judgment there, but you seem like you might. In Utah, we love to spend time in our mountains and doing all kinds of things, whether you're hunting or hiking or whatever it is you like to do. Or just going to your kids' soccer games. It's one of my favorite things to do in the summer, and it's tragic that we can't do it often. I mean, there were a couple of days last year where we in Salt Lake City, at least, I don't know how it was in Tooele, maybe similar, but especially in Salt Lake. I'm down in Highland, but in Salt Lake we had the worst air quality of anywhere in the world for a few days last year, and that's, I mean, if you've been to China or India, that's saying something, and we just can't have that. So I agree. I think the government has really failed on a lot of fronts, and when it comes to forest management, we've got to do better. I mean, there are other things that we need to do too, but that's a major immediate thing we've got to take more seriously.
Do you think Utah should be able to sue California for its mismanagement of its forests?
Well, I tend to blame the federal government more. I mean, you're raising the California government, but
it's California that laid the laws down.
Well, I'd have to look into that. I just don't know. But I know the federal government, has vast amounts of lands, and I think it poorly manages them in many cases, and certainly when it comes to forests. So that's where I've been more focused. But I'm not familiar with the laws you described. But
it was California that laid down the law that they cannot. They can't do any cutting in their
Well, I hope they change that, because I hope other states do too. I mean, we've got these forest fires. We've got these problems. We've got forest fires here in Utah too. We need to figure out how to better address them.
Not near as hot or near as fast. California, their fires are something special. When a fire is moving, faster than cars can drive, that's scary.
It's a
That is
different
scary.
flavor.
Yeah. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. So, I just want to ask a quick question. You get in there, kind of what maneuvers would you do to kind of end the gridlock and, and all that? Because it seems like the only time anything comes out of the Senate is something that is just giving more power to the government. And quite frankly, I don't think that they have spent their power well.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, they haven't. I mean, let's look at the last 2 years where the government has been an obstruction to the economy and the well-being of its people. And that's just flat out. You could have argued it 2 months ago, but it's out. The government has been you had certain states that overreacted for political reasons. You had other states that overreacted for party reasons. You had some states that went the other way. But overall, the government has printed more money in the last year and a half than was printed in the 100 years before that, which has sent us into scares of hyperinflation. I mean, what can you do?
Well, on inflation, that's another thing that I want to tackle. And you asked about gridlock too. I want to come to that as well. But look, on inflation, I think we've got to bring critical manufacturing back to the United States. I mean, we're so dependent on China and other foreign producers that when this pandemic hit, our supply chains just got destroyed. And we just, like microchips, for example. I mean, you got to buy a new car now. You're gonna pay out your nose for that car. You're gonna pay a 40% premium on a used car and a high premium, not quite as high on a new car, but still new cars are expensive anyway. And so, we've got to bring back critical manufacturing to the United States. Of course, we can't force companies to come back, but I do think we should make sure that we have we create an environment here, a business environment, where these producers want to come back. And in some cases where our national security is at stake, maybe we should create some incentives. But we've got to bring critical manufacturing back. I also think that we've got to encourage Americans to get back to work. And part of that is making sure that people are safe to go back to work. People have health issues. I've got, people in my family who have, chronic illnesses that will eventually kill them, and they're vulnerable. And if they get this thing, they're in trouble. And so people have got concerns. But we've got
how do you do that? How do you make it so they're safe to go back to work? Because this is a different animal where you've got to infringe on the ability for someone else to perform and to maybe enjoy life, but to perform at a level in order to make a smaller number of people happy, or to make where do you comport the cost? Do you rob from the many to give to the one?
Yeah, I think, it's obviously it's a tough issue, but I think every life is valuable.
Sure. Sure.
And I imagine you agree with that. That's not.
I do too. But
I hear you. Look, I get it. I hear you. Look, I would say this. It's a very tough issue. But people have different opinions about this, but I'll share mine and, be eager to hear yours. So, I oppose vaccine mandates, but I'm vaccinated and my wife is vaccinated. We've gotten our kids vaccinated. That's what we're doing to handle it. And so it's not perfect. Frankly, I caught COVID for the first time, as far as I know, after I was triple vaccinated. And so, but thankfully it was light. It was like a light cold, for example. But, that's what we can do. We can do that. We don't need mandates to do that.
That's right. And the vaccine doesn't stop you from catching or spreading it.
It just lowers
it just lowers the effects on the person vaccinated.
And the transmissibility, as I understand it.
The reports haven't shown that. It's just shown that it's lowered the effects.
Well, we'd have to look at those, but my understanding is that it protects you from infection, although some still get infected.
Yeah.
I was one of them.
Yeah.
but I've read that it lowers transmissibility, but we could look at that again. But that's one thing we can do, to fight back. And if we do that, then we help ourselves get past this. But my bigger point on inflation is that we've got to get back to work, because if we're not back to work, government keeps printing money, as you say, to support people who are concerned about going back to work. And because they're not back at work, our productivity is low. So we have more dollars chasing less products, and that's going to drive up inflation. And also the supply chain issues are impacting that too, right? Less products, steady or increasing demand, that's going to increase prices and lead to inflation. And so these are the things we've got to do. We've got to get back to work. People have, I think, valid concerns. Some of them are in my own family. They're my own loved ones. I get it. We have to find a way to get people back to work safely. We can innovate. We can figure it out. Let's bring critical manufacturing back to the United States. Let's figure out how to incentivize that and improve our supply chain. And frankly, we'll be a stronger, more secure nation going forward if we're not depending so much on China for critical products that go into everything like chips.
We got to cut you loose in 2 minutes, but I just want to throw one more question at you.
Sure.
On the inflation market, our nation spends a lot of its people's money overseas, abroad, committing violence on other people. And right now we sit on the eve of World War III, or day 5 of it, or whatever it is. And I wonder, do you think it's possible for us to back off of this war footing? Because I think unless we do that, unless we quit committing to spending our blood and treasure on other lands, I think we're doomed to fail. We're doomed. We can't continue to spend this money we're spending.
Well, I'll say this, we spent way too much money in Afghanistan. We shouldn't have gone to Iraq. In Afghanistan, I think that was something we had to do. We were attacked by Al-Qaeda terrorists. They were going to do it again.
I don't think conquering Afghanistan was needed there.
I don't think we needed to control it. I mean, we had this grand vision of turning Afghanistan into America, and it just wasn't in the cards. And we were just so unrealistic about that. But yes, we needed to go in there and destroy Al-Qaeda and destroy the Taliban, but we weren't going to turn it into America. And that was just unrealistic on our part. We spent 20 years there, a bunch of money, a bunch of blood. A lot of servicemen and women lost their lives, and it just we needed not that approach. It shouldn't have been.
Well, let's not forget the Afghanis we killed.
Well, we killed a lot of Taliban, and there's always and they deserved it.
What about innocents?
Well, unfortunately,
how about on the way out when we killed, what was it, 7 children under 14?
Well, I've served, and I don't know about your background.
We're both veterans.
You're both veterans, great. So, given your ages, you probably both served in wars.
I didn't. He did.
Okay.
And you got to have collateral damage whenever you go in anywhere, Jared. So I mean, it's something.
That's why you don't go in.
Well, but look, I'll say that. Look, that's why I've served in a few wars. I hate war. I tell people all the time, war is worse than anyone imagines who's never been through it. You can play all the video games you want, watch all the movies you want to watch. It's hell. And I hate war. I hate it. Sometimes it's necessary. When it is, we're using, sometimes, crude weapons of war that do damage that you don't intend, and that's why we should avoid war. So I agree with both of these points. On Afghanistan, we spent too much time there trying to do something that was impossible. We shouldn't have gone into Iraq, in my opinion. That was a mistake. As it concerns Ukraine, this is what I think. I am worried. Look, I know you guys hate tyrants and tyranny like I do. I am concerned because of what we've learned through history, that when you don't stop a tyrant who invades foreign countries, then they continue going, they keep going. That's the history of the world. And so I don't think we should put troops in Ukraine. I think the Ukrainians have to fight their own fight. But man, I look at that flag behind you guys, and I know the Ukrainians that's their whole spirit right now. They're fighting for their freedom. I don't want our boys and girls to be there, but I think we should help arm them so that they can fight for their own freedom.
Should we give them the A-10s though? Should we provide that much aid, or should we just give them like missiles?
I think they should have javelins. I think they should have. I think they should be able to protect their skies.
I think whatever they can buy.
Yeah, sell it to them. Yeah.
Well, I've got a counter argument for you.
Yeah.
Because all reports say that for the last 8 years, Ukraine has been has put Donetsk region under siege.
The Ukraine has put Donetsk.
Yeah, since the vote in 2014.
I mean, the Russians invaded Ukraine and took that region from Ukraine.
The last 8 years. For the last 8 years.
But Russia invaded Ukraine to take that land, not just several years ago.
No, Russia went into Crimea, and at the same time, Donetsk and Luhansk voted as well to join Russia, and then Ukraine put them under siege.
No.
Am I incorrect on that?
We may have a different opinion on that. Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, look, it did the same thing to Georgia. It toppled, it toppled the government in Belarus. I mean, that's what happened. Russia, and
I'm not on the side. I'm on neither side on this. I don't want us to get involved at all. I want us to turn Boeing into the microchip manufacturer, and I want to turn Lockheed Martin into a new car manufacturer, and I want to have General Electric start building refrigerators again. And I don't like that our economy is invested so much in destruction, because that's money you just throw away. You may as well wad it into a ball, poke it into your toilet, and hit the lever.
And let me just say that money, we've got to provide for our own security. There's no doubt about it. I believe I'm
Second Amendment does a pretty good job at that.
Right, but on a national level, I believe in strength, peace through strength. But let me ask you, because I'd love to hear what you would think about this. I mean, my concern is that Russia takes Ukraine. They've already invaded. They invaded Georgia. They did the same thing to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
They found another way that they toppled an independent government in
Georgia. They tried it in Chechnya. They tried Azerbaijan right after. I mean, they've tried lots of stuff over the years.
Right, but now this is beyond what they've done in the past. So they're scaling
very
up,
much,
ratcheting up. If what I'm concerned about is they roll through Ukraine and then they roll through other parts of Europe. I mean, that's the history of the world.
Do you think Russia may have a point with NATO moving weapon systems right up onto their border after George Bush Sr.'s promise that wasn't going to happen?
Well, I do think this is what I'll say on that. I think countries in Eastern Europe should have the freedom to decide. They're sovereign states full of free people like you and me. They should be able to decide whether they want to join the EU or NATO or, the country club, whatever it is. They're free people. They can decide to do that. I do think, we need to have a little bit of sense about deploying those kinds of weapon systems in the immediate vicinity of a country that,
because
would be concerned like we are. So I think that's a valid point.
What would you do if Russia started putting them in Mexico? How would we react?
We wouldn't allow it.
We would roll into Mexico the next day, right?
Well, I don't know if we'd do that, but we would do everything. I mean, we had a Cuban Missile Crisis.
It's the same thing.
So we blockaded so that they couldn't bring them in.
Hell, that promise was even put in writing, and Clinton breached it 4 years later.
Right.
Well, 2.5 years later.
So I hear that, but the fact is we didn't put those weapons in Ukraine, and Russia's invading anyway.
No, but they're U.S. made weapons, and then NATO now is trying to coax half of Ukraine in. Ukraine's in a dang civil war and has been, but now NATO's trying to coax them in, and that closes off another avenue. Then there's the the ability for them to ship oil over. And I'm not standing up for Russia. Russia's a bad guy, but I don't want to be one of those. I don't like reading the history books that they teach you in school and then reading the ones as an adult and saying, oh, we screwed up there.
Well, we're certainly far from perfect. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're still a relatively young country.
Mm-hmm.
We've got plenty of our own problems, and we make mistakes. But, we ought to get smarter as we go. And I just, talk about our economy. I mean, one of our biggest trading partners is Europe, whether we like it or not. That is the reality. And if Russia
we're getting yelled at by your campaign manager.
Oh, okay, all right.
But yeah, no, you're right. They are one of our larger trading partners. What I fear right now is that if we keep striking at Russia, we're going to draw China and Russia closer together.
I'm happy just not to get
That's a fair
nuked.
concern.
Which neither of them are our allies, and them together, then we actually, because right now, them alone, we don't have a threat on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
But them together, it's a different animal.
If they could come together, I mean, totalitarian dictatorships, authoritarian regimes, they have a hard time forming very lasting relationships. But if they do, I agree, we've got a real problem. So that's an important consideration. I would agree with you on that.
And so I don't want us to support Russia. And when I say these things, it's because right now all you hear is the other side. And I think when the media comes out and only gives you one side of a story, you're missing the other side, and mistakes are made. And weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we've made many mistakes through our history.
Are we making a mistake now?
I think that if we supply the Ukrainians with the weapons they need to fight their fight.
If we sold them, let's make a profit.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I think that if we do not stop Russia and Ukraine, and I mean our allies, the free world, we are going to see Russia roll through Europe, and we're going to have a hell of a problem on our hands.
Do you think that a nation with an economy smaller than Mexico's can go up against Germany at all? Even if you add in the Ukrainian economy, and even if you add in, let's say, Ukraine, Estonia, let's add a whole bunch in. Do you still think they can go up against Germany and France? Because remember, add all those economies together, still not Germany and France. Now Dave's yelling at me. Your campaign manager's yelling at me.
You got to get to your next interview.
Yeah.
Hey, we can have you back on to talk again.
Yeah, anytime. No, this was good, and it was good talking to you. I remember when you ran the last presidential election, didn't get near enough information about you that I would have liked to have gotten.
Well, this helps. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're welcome on anytime. Just reach out to us. Come on. I like a spirited debate. And I am. I
didn't even get to ask you a Bitcoin question.
Yeah,
you gotta.
I know.
Breathe a little,
Dave's freaking out. But this is the big thing. I like a spirited debate, and
I'm with you.
And you're an independent, which means that you don't have a party to hold strong to, which I think gives me a chance to, if not pick you apart on peace, maybe put the idea in your mind. I hope that one day we can live that way.
Amen to that. Boy, what a great note to end on. Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Come on anytime.
Good luck, Evan.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.